Hey guys, and welcome to episode 7 of the Inventory Remake series. In this video, we'll cover how to select and deselect items in the hotbar in order to hold them in your hand like a normal tool in the default backpack. We'll also make sure you can press both the keyboard keys as well as the slots themselves to hold these items, allowing the system to work on mobile devices as well. Anyway, let's get right into the video. Just like we added attributes for the selected color and normal color of the sample frame, we're going to do the same thing for each of the hotbar frames, making sure they're both the color 3 type. The quickest way to do this is to select all of the slot buttons at the same time before adding the attributes, and it'll add them to all of them. Back in Inventory Server, we'll create a new function at the top called Equip Item, using the player and the stack ID for the stack to equip as the parameters. We'll create another function called Unequip Items, using just the player as the argument this time. As opposed to equipping to and unequipping from the hotbar, these two functions will equip to or unequip from the character, sort of like if you were to press on a tool in your hotbar with the default backpack system and your character would then hold that tool. In the unequip items function, we'll find the character and return if it doesn't exist. We'll do the same for the humanoid, but this time using findFirstChild, since the humanoid is a child of the character rather than a property. Finally, we'll run the humanoid unequip tools function, which essentially takes any tools that are in the player's character and moves them into their backpack instead, effectively unequipping the tool. In the inventory server.start function, we'll create another listen remote using the signal module to allow the client to run both these equip and unequip functions, connecting one to the equip item function and the other to the unequip items function. Back in the equip item function itself, we'll first find the stack based on the stack ID that was provided. To make this easier, we'll create a variable reference to the player's inventory table, just like in the other functions. We'll loop through all of the item stacks in the player's inventory and check for each one if the stack ID is equal to the one that was provided in the arguments. If it is, we'll set our stack data variable to that stack and then break to end the loop. We'll then run the unequip items function to make sure there's not any items already equipped to the player's character before adding another item. Then, if stack data isn't nil, thus meaning it was found in the inventory, then we'll grab the first tool from the stackdata.items list, we'll check if the player's character isn't currently loaded in and return if it isn't, then we'll set the tool's parent to the player's character, effectively equipping the tool. The default system for tools automatically does the rest for us if we just put the tool inside the character. In the inventory client module, above the update inventory data function, we'll create a new function called update equipped item. This function will essentially check if there are any items in the player's character, and if there are, it'll find which stack the item belongs to and display on the hotbar that the item is currently being held by highlighting that slot. We'll create a variable reference to the player's character, returning if it doesn't exist, just like earlier. Then we'll set a variable called tool to char findFirstChild of class tool, which finds the first tool object inside the player's character, or returns nil if there wasn't any found. We'll check if a tool was found, and if it was, we'll then want to find what slot that tool goes to. We'll create a variable called slotnum and set it to nil to start. Then we'll loop through the numbers 1 through 10 to loop through the hotbar slots. Switching gears for a second, we'll head back to the start function and run this new function we created every time the inventory updated item remote is fired. This will, once we complete the function anyway, update the display of whether or not an item is currently being held and highlight or not highlight the corresponding slots accordingly. We'll also add it after the first call to update the inventory and display as well. Back in our update equipped item function, in the for loop we created, we'll set a variable called stackID to the hotbar slot for the specific number we're looping through. We'll create another variable called stackData and run the findStackDataFromID function using that stack ID we found. Then, if a stack was found based on the stack ID and the stack's name is the same as the tool's name that we found earlier, we'll set our slotnum variable to that specific slot number. Finally, we'll update the display of the hotbar by first checking if slotnum isn't nil and then creating a variable called slotf, setting it to the hotbar slot frame corresponding to that slot number. We'll then run another for loop through the hotbar slots this time and, for each one, check if that slot is the slotf variable we defined earlier, and if it is, we'll set it to the selected color, otherwise we'll set it to the normal color. If the slotnum is nil, thus meaning that either no hotbar slot matches the tool that we equipped, or that the stack data simply wasn't found, we'll fire the server's unequip items function, unequipping any items from the player's character, since this situation should only happen if something's not working as intended. Finally, if there was no tool found to begin with, we'll loop through all of the hotbar slots again just like before, but just set them all to the normal color and none of them to the selected color. Back in our inventory server module, we'll copy the signal.fire client from our other functions that updates the client's display whenever something changes, and we'll paste it in both the equip item and unequip items functions at the very end of each. For the equip item function, however, we'll make sure to only fire the update signal call if a stack was found for the provided stack ID, since there's no reason to update the items if nothing was changed. Now we'll head back to the inventory client module again to set up the hotbar slot selecting using both the corresponding computer keys or by pressing the slots. First, we'll go to the bottom of our input began function and loop through all the hotbar slot frames using our keys to slots table. We'll check if the input's key code is equal to the key we're currently looping through. Before we do any more, however, we'll create another value in the inventory client table called equipped stack ID, which will be similar to our selected stack ID, but for the equipped slot in the hotbar just to keep track of it. We'll create an entirely new function called inventory client.toggleEquip, giving the slot num as the only parameter. This is the function we'll use from the client side to toggle whether or not a specific slot is currently selected in the hotbar. Given that we set that function to use a slot number rather than a stack ID, we'll also head over to the inventory server module again and change stack ID to slot num as well. We'll change the for loop to loop through the hotbar as opposed to the inventory, and then we'll, for each hotbar slot in the player's inventory data, check if the slot key matches the slot num parameter. We'll also need to find the stack data from the ID we have by looping through the hotbar slots, so we'll create a new function similar to what we have on the client that will look through the inventory for a specific player and find a stack's data table based on the stack ID. We'll loop through all the stacks in the player's inventory. In order to do this, we'll also need to add the player as another argument to our function. Then we'll check if each stack data we loop through has the same stack ID as the one provided in the function's parameters. Returning to the equip item function, we'll set the stack data to inventory server.findStackData from ID, providing the player and stack ID from looping through the hotbar as our arguments. Now the rest of this function should work roughly the same now that we have the stack data. Back in the inventory client module, we'll change equipped stack ID to equipped slot num instead to match the other changes we made. In the update equipped item function, when a slot number is found, we'll set the equipped slot num to that number for reference in other functions. In the else portion, we'll set equipped slot num to nil again, as no slot would be equipped in that case. We'll do so when the slot num isn't found as well. Finally, getting back to our toggle equip function, we'll check if the currently equipped slot number is the same as the slot number provided in the parameter, and if so, we'll fire the server's unequip items function to unequip that item. If the argument provided is a different slot than the one that's already equipped, we'll fire the server's equip item function instead, specifying the slot number to equip. Finally, getting back to the input began function, we'll run our new toggle equip function we just created, but we'll need a way to find the slot number for the slot that was pressed. We can do this by finding the slot f variable from the for loop in the hotbar slots table, as table.find will return the index of an item it is found at, or nil if it wasn't found. In this case, that index happens to be the exact same as the slot number that corresponds to that slot frame, which is convenient in our case. Finally, testing it for the first time in this video, we can see that pressing number keys does in fact toggle whether or not slots are equipped. The only issue is that sometimes it doesn't equip the right slot, which happens when you have multiple stacks of the same item equipped in the hotbar at the same time, given that our update equipped item function finds the slot based on the tool's name. Fixing this with how our inventory client module gets the inventory data from the server is a bit tricky. If this was on the server, we could just run table.find on the stackdata.items table to see if the tool found in the character is in that specific stack's item list. But we can't do that since inventory server.getInventoryData happens to replace the items table with the count value because for some reason I thought you couldn't pass instances across the client server boundary, but later realized that you actually can just fine. So to fix this, head into inventory server.getInventoryData and in each individual stack, add an items table setting it equal to the stackdata.items table we already have on the server. We'll leave the count as is though, just so we don't have to update the rest of the code on the inventory client, and since we'll need it for saving and loading anyway. Back in the inventory client, the update equipped item function, we'll replace the portion that checks if the found tool's name is the same as the stack's name with the table.find, checking if the tool object itself is found in the items table, like I was saying we could do earlier. So when we test it, we can see it gets the right slots now, but it seems to get unequipped the second we equip an item. For now though, we'll head to the inventory client module's start function and create the portion of the code that handles clicking the hotbar slots as opposed to pressing their corresponding keys in order to equip them. To do this, we'll loop through the hotbar slots table again, connecting the mouse button one-click event for each hotbar slot. We'll then run the toggle equip function using I from the hotbar slots table as our argument. Now we can see clicking on the tools does the same thing as pressing the keybinds, but it still unequips the items immediately after we equip them. This is actually happening because of an issue in our unregistered item function. We need to make sure that the tool is inside the backpack or that it's inside the character. Before just checking if it's inside the character, however, we also need to make sure that the character isn't nil, so that the if statement doesn't give us an error if the player is currently respawning. As we can see, that seems to have fixed the issue. You can now use both the keyboard keys and press the slots themselves to equip and unequip the hotbar slots, and it will update the display and hold the tools accordingly. If you guys have any questions about this video or any other videos of mine, or even just Roblox Studio questions in general, feel free to ask them in the 9 Scripting Lessons Discord server in the description below. Additionally, if you would like access to the tutorial files for my tutorials like this one, including the actual code for you to look through and use, you can purchase a membership for $299 a month on either YouTube or Patreon for access to that, as well as shoutouts at the end of my videos. If you want more direct one-on-one help with your projects, you can get one of the other 2 higher memberships as well for $14.99 a month or $24.99 a month for the ability to schedule up to 1 or 2 hours per week, respectively, of personal tutoring with me, where I can directly help you with your projects. Additionally, you would gain access to specific channels in the Discord for asking questions that get priority response over other question channels and over YouTube for quicker help times. Nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll see you next time.